Do you wonder about the impacts of chemicals in our ecosystem? As the biogeochemical involves the elemental transfers between different components of the forest system, this includes the sulfur cycle. The sulfur cycle describes how sulfur moves through the geosphere and biosphere. Weathering releases sulfur from rocks, which assimilates by the microbes and plants. Then it moves to the food chain where plants and animals assimilate it before being released when they decompose. Sulfur is required to properly function. Proteins and enzymes in plants and animals that they rely for sulfur. Sulfur is absorbed by plants when dissolved in water. Animals consume plants to ensure that they could get enough sulfur to get healthy. These compounds contribute significantly to acid rain, which can kill sensitive aquatic organisms and harm marble monuments and stone buildings. I wonder what more biogeochemical cycles could bring to the ecosystem.
And that will be nitrogen. Our Earth's atmosphere is made up of 78% nitrogen. Nitrogen is an essential nutrient for sustaining life on Earth. Living beings do not breathe in nitrogen like oxygen, but we do absorb nitrogen through the medium of food. Nitrogen is a cycle in which nitrogen falls to the ground as precipitation. It finds its way to the bacteria on the roots. Nitrogen combines with nitrogen in the form of ammonia in a process called nitrogen fixation. Ammonia is toxic, so it combines oxygen in a process called nitrification. It's in a form called nitrate. Additional nitrifying bacteria converting to nitrate. Plants can absorb this nitrogen called assimilation. Same goes to the bacteria that releases the nitrogen to the atmosphere in a process called denitrifying. When the nitrogen returns to the atmosphere, once the animal dies after eating the plants or it gets rid of waste, it decomposes and breaks. This nitrogen either dead or the waste process called ammonification. The nitrogen can enter the cycle at nitrification and the cycle continues on.
The consequences of this issue can be predicted using the Le Chatelier principle. This demonstrates what happens when one variable in an equilibrium system is changed. It generates an effect in order to manage the damage. As an example of this principle, one is the anthropogenic nitrogen.
Anthropogenic nitrogen contributes to both global warming and climate change. The addition of nitrogen to the soil by humans could contribute to the greenhouse effect. Nitrogen inputs have a tendency to stimulate plants' growth, resulting in increased carbon dioxide absorption by terrestrial ecosystems from the atmosphere. Recent research has shown that they also induce the production of nitrous oxide from the fertilized soils, which is a considerably more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Since the 1860s, human activities have resulted in more than twofold increase in nitrogen inputs to the terrestrial biosphere, mostly from increasing atmospheric nitrogen deposition and the use of fertilizer in agriculture. Nitrogen is a necessary nutrient for plants and microbial development, and it's one of the most important limiting nutrients in many natural ecosystems due to its ability to fix nitrogen. However, human disturbance on the nitrogen cycle, such as fertilizer application, have been shown to alter terrestrial sources and sinks of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, sometimes known as laughing gas. The possible negative implication of increasing nitrogen in ecosystem as increasing nitrogen availability may increase nitrogen losses from ecosystem and potentially have detrimental impacts on plant health.
Another example is sulfur, which is equally essential as phosphorus and is classified as an important mineral. It aids in the synthesis of key enzymes in plants as well as the formation of plants' protein. However, overuse of sulfur-rich fertilizer can cause acid rain when excess sulfur is carried away in oceans. This has the potential to contaminate groundwater. Furthermore, soil pollution and acidity are caused by a high sulfur content of the soil. Plants will have trouble collecting nutrients through their roots if the soil pH is acidic. The resulting nutrients deficit may cause issues such as impeding plants' growth, yellow leaves, and causing an agricultural output to decrease rather than rise.
An invasive species is a type of organism that is not native to a specific place. Invasive species have the potential to affect the new area's economy and environment. They fight for natural resources with native wildlife and prosper at the expense of the local ecosystem. Invasive species are frequently associated with human activities. However, they can also be introduced through natural sources, such as storms. Some invasive species are purposely introduced to maintain a stable ecosystem balance by limiting the size and/or distribution of species. This prevents the species from becoming too numerous, which could disturb the ecosystem. Not just animals, but bacteria, fungus, and plants can be invasive as well. They have an impact on health, the economy, infrastructure, and the ecosystem. Preventing the spread of invasive species is still the most effective strategy to do so. The bigger the population of invasive species, the bigger the impact that it will have on the ecosystem. It will dispense with native species and may even take over their environment. It is crucial to understand that invasive species are detrimental, not because of what they are, but rather because of where they are.
Here are some examples of invasive species found in a flora environment. First, water hyacinth. Water hyacinth is a plant native to South America that has become an invasive species in many parts of the world. People often introduce the plant, which grows in the water because of its pretty flowers. But the plant spreads quickly, often choking out native wildlife. In Lake Victoria, Uganda, water hyacinth grew so thickly that boats could not get through it. Even some ports were closed. Water hyacinth prevented sunlight from reaching underwater. Thus, plants and algae could not grow, preventing fish from feeding and reproducing. Second, the Japanese honeysuckle or Lonicera japonica. One of many invasive varieties of honeysuckle in the United States, Japanese honeysuckle was brought to Long Island, New York in 1806 for ornamental use and erosion control. The plant has become prolific throughout much of the East Coast as it adapts to a wide range of conditions. Japanese honeysuckle is an aggressive vine that smothers, shades, and girdles other vegetation. Many of the birds eat the fruit of this plant, thereby spreading the honeysuckle seeds. Its native alternative are trumpet creeper or Campsis radicans and coral honeysuckle or Lonicera sempervirens. Lastly, kudzu or Pleraria montana varlobata. Japan introduced kudzu to the US at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition in 1876. It was first promoted as an ornamental plant and later as a forage crop in the Southeast. 1 million acres of kudzu were planted in the 1930s and 1940s by the Soil Conservation Service to reduce soil erosion and deforested lands. It was not until the 1950s that it was recognized as an invasive. Once established, kudzu grows at a rate of up to 1 foot a day and 60 feet annually. This vigorous vine takes over areas in the southeast by smothering plants and kills trees by adding immense weight and girdling or toppling them. Its native alternative are Carolina jessamine or Gelsomnium sempervirens, and Virginia creeper or Parthonicius cuniculifera.
Plants rely on epigenetic mechanisms to operate properly. Epigenetic studies proteins' interactions with DNA and its related components, including histones and different modifications such as methylation, which modify the base or target of transcription. Changes in the expression of stress-responsive genes in plants are caused by epigenetics control based on histone modifications and DNA methylation, which allows for adaptability to varied conditions. Plants have a complex and powerful epigenetic circuitry thanks to the interplay of DNA methylation, histone modification, and non-coding RNAs. Plants' increased epigenetic regulations reflects their developmental mode, lifestyle, and evolutionary history. It underlines that floras from various periods or times may have difficult continuing to develop if their genes do not operate properly. We should be concerned about these variables since their gene expression and heritage ranges can have a large impact on the environment, and we need them to maintain ecological equilibrium.